right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being on time and ready to roll. Welcome back to the School Closure Advisory Committee. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the alternates, to the staff, VUSD staff, for preparing everything for us so nicely, and to our audience members and alternates who also are joining us tonight. Okay, we'll start with attendance. All right, Stephanie Caldwell, Sarah Cameron, Maruja Calense, Kevin Corse, Jorge De Leon, Evarista Escoto, Oscar Gomez, Catherine Heller, Kevin Herrera, Kristen Ippolito, Melanie Lindsay, Sandy Lamelli Harrison, Peggy Mariansky present, Sarah McLaughlin, Catherine Mundo Garafa, Jeanette Park, Carol Peak, here. Thank you, Andrea Rodriguez, Cindy Traub, and Manuel Velasquez, Annette Walters, Monica West, and Stacy Whitaker. Okay, perfect. Thank you all again for being here. We're going to move to adopt tonight's agenda. Anyone care? Thank you. And second?
Second.
Okay, approved. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Opposed? All right, perfect. And we have some public comments. So Marianne, I'll let you take over.
Thank you. Just a few housekeeping reminders this evening. Please be sure to talk into your microphones because we are recording. For those in the public, if you have not been here before, please just keep how do I say this nicely? Keep the conversations down to a low roar so that our folks here on the committee are able to hear one another. And if I call your name for when I call your name for public comment, you will have 3 minutes to speak this evening. I will give you a 30-second warning. Before we begin, we'd like to remind everyone that the governing board recognizes the impact that civility has on the effective operation of the district, including its role in creating a safe and positive school climate and enabling a focus on student well-being, learning, and achievement. The board understands that the First Amendment provides strong protection for speech. However, the board expects that all speech and expression and action will follow the norms of civil behavior on district grounds and in district meetings. Please remember that we do have students who may watch these or even attend our meetings, so keep language as respectful as possible. Please remember, per the Brown Act, we need to keep public comment within the scope of the School Closures Advisory Committee, and if you do make a comment that is not associated with it, we may have to stop your comment at that time. I will call 2 names at a time for public comment. If you can please begin making your way towards the podium when you are called. Let me just bring up your timer. First up will be Tanya Touts-Hager, followed by Candace Schmidt. Is this where I go? Yes?
Hi, good evening. Oh, boy, that's loud. Okay. I'll be right here. My name is Tanya Touts-Hager, and I teach second grade at Lemon Grove School. I've taught there for about 15 years. My own 2 children attended when it was Blanche Reynolds, and I walk to school every morning because I also live in the neighborhood. I'm here to comment on the part of the rubric that has the committee looking at the dashboard and student performances. If you don't work in education, you may look at the dashboard and see schools not meeting statewide goals. When you look at the dashboard, you don't see the whole picture of a school. I'm not just speaking for my school tonight, but for the schools that don't always reach their goals, but are still working their butts off to make improvements and show progress. It's easy to say, let's look at test scores and use that as one of the parameters for closing a school. But what that doesn't do is to take into consideration improvement, what percentage of students have IEPs, and what percentage of students are enrolled in special day classes. One question I'd like for you to consider is if students at a low-performing school are moved to schools that don't receive Title I funds, does that mean they won't have access to the interventions they were receiving at their Title I schools? And what happens to the low-income families if their neighborhood school closes? The burden of relocating and getting to school falls on those low-income households. Please know that the dashboard isn't a complete snapshot of what a school is like for the students and the families that attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Candace Schmidt, followed by Ashley Pope.
Hi, I'm Candace Schmidt. I'm an alternate, but I'm also a parent. I have twins at Lincoln. They're going to be in second grade. So I'm super new to the district, but I care a lot because they're going to be in second grade. So I'm in it for the long haul for sure. And I'm a Ventura local, born and raised, grown up here in Ojai. So I have a lot of love for this town for sure. I wanted to talk about two schools, Mound and Foothill. They are not neighborhood boundary schools. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but Mound pulls many students primarily from Poinsettia and Juana Maria, both schools facing significant enrollment decline. Originally, Mound was created to be a special math magnet school using special math curriculum. It's not a magnet school anymore. Mound students use the same curriculum as every elementary school in VUSD. If Mound were to close, transportation would not be an issue for VUSD, as those students would have the option to go to one of their awesome VUSD boundary schools. Foothill was also designed to be a specialized technology high school, no sports, a different kind of focus. Since then, it offers all the sports except football, maybe cheerleading, not really sure. Due to the lack of planning, the district now has to pay a significant amount of money so that Foothill can run sports programs without the required facilities. VUSD spends a lot of money to rent fields, pools, gyms, fields, etc. from Ventura College. Are we really going to spend all that money so high school kids can play sports at that school and at the same time close elementary schools? Students can play all those sports at Buena and Ventura high schools. And also the low-income families that go to boundary schools, they go because that's their only choice. You cut their boundary school, like the lady just said, how are they gonna get there? That's so crazy. There's two schools, they're not boundary. Just close them and everyone would be done. Go to the high schools that are already there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And last comment tonight is Ashley Pope.
Good evening. Thank you for your time, service, and dedication to this important process. I'm here tonight to offer a different perspective, one of opportunity and hope. While school closures are undoubtedly difficult, they also present a rare opportunity to reimagine how we serve students. Thoughtful leadership during this moment will create stronger, more inclusive schools that better prepare every student for adult life. There is no question that this committee must work through the data before engaging in deep deliberation. However, it is not too soon to brainstorm how each campus space can be better utilized to serve students through thoughtful consideration. For example, VUSD operates 2 early intervention centers serving preschool-age students with disabilities. The state of California is investing heavily in preschool programs. The school closure process could create an opportunity to establish a dedicated early learning and inclusion center where preschool students learn alongside their peers through co-teaching and inclusive practices. Young children should not be separated from their peers simply because they have a disability. The EICs could be closed and an elementary campus could be transitioned into a preschool fit to serve the youngest VUSD students. Similarly, there has been discussion about increasing access and participation in technology programs for historically underserved students on the West End. Yet there is currently no West Side Elementary pathway into Data's technology-focused programs. If an Avenue Elementary School must close, perhaps Data could evolve into a K-8 program, creating a continuous pathway that prepares students for success in Data's Idea Center, then Foothill Tech High School, and ultimately in high-demand technology careers. That is how we create transformational opportunities for students and families. I share these examples not because they are the only solution, but because I hope this committee will think boldly and creatively about what comes next. The decisions before you are about more than determining which schools may close. They are about how this district will restructure to better serve students going forward. If several schools must close, we have the responsibility to be thoughtful while we are reshaping the future of public education in Ventura. I encourage you to approach this work with that lens in mind. Finally, I would like to revisit a concern raised during the April 23rd meeting regarding the scoring for unduplicated student populations. A committee member noted that awarding full points within a 40 to 60% range may not adequately reflect VUSD's demographics when VUSD's unduplicated percentage leans higher. The question was raised whether this metric is skewed. Upon deeper review, I believe that concern is warranted and the metric is skewed and should be revisited. Seconds. Thank you again for your service and thoughtful consideration throughout this process.
That is all the public comment we have for this evening.
Okay, thank you. So we have the consent calendar, which is the committee meetings from the May meeting, minutes, beg your pardon, from the May meeting. Anyone care to move that to be moved into action? Looking for a motion. Thank you. Let's just say it boldly. In a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. So it looks like we'll begin tonight with some follow-up items from facilities, which was last month's presentation.
Yeah, good evening, committee. So the follow-up items that were from our previous presentation from facilities, this committee requested 5 years of fit tool assessments. So that has been provided in your packet. You've also requested we provided last 2 iterations the bond implementation plan that the board has approved. And so that has been provided in the packet, the PowerPoint presentation. And then there was a request for the questions and answers that were, that this committee inbox was getting to be shared. And so we did is printed them all out for this meeting so you guys have physical copies, but we've also created a Q&A link to the school closures website. So going forward, we'll just be updating as the questions come in. We'll list them on that site and provide the answers on that site as well. And that's it.
There was a request for consideration of the VASE site, and is that material in here too?
Dr. Cash, you want me to take it or I could take it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one of the questions was why VASE is not being considered. Because VASE is not being considered because it doesn't, their funding is outside of the general fund and the district is facing a deficit in its general fund. And so all of VASE's employees, staff are all funded differently, and those funds are outside of the general fund.
And then I can also add that
So any savings we would get from potentially closing VASE wouldn't impact the district's general fund.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'll just add that part of as the committee goes through this process and we bring the facts and numbers to you in terms of what the potential savings are for school closures, most of that, there is some facility saving, but most of that is due to duplication of personnel that would be reduced as a result of school closures. We do not have a duplicate of VASE where thereby those programs could be consolidated. Separately from that, could the board at a future point look at how the VASE property is utilized? Yes, but that would be outside of the school closure process.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. Stephanie?
Yeah, I just had a question on the FIT reports. It looks like the 2022, 2021, and 2020, certain schools, it says these schools are inspected by the County Office of Education. Can you explain the difference between the inspections?
Yeah, so I think our director of risk management was here last time. So what happens is the County Office of Education on a yearly basis selects certain schools to do their official facilities inspection tests. So they don't review all of the schools every year, but our district contracts out to do all of our schools.
So it's more like a spot.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then I guess we're up to the meat of the meeting. I think before I hand over the floor, Dr. Castro, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we all know that there's very few things more emotional than test scores. And we've heard people in our public comment section throughout this process speak of them as the highest priority ever and maybe the only thing that should be considered when we're looking at school closures. And we've heard from people who are wondering, why are we even looking at them? And I think that discrepancy or that range of feelings about test scores and ed services is exactly why we need to consider it in this process, to maintain credibility among ourselves and with the community at large, and in our recommendation when we finally do make a recommendation to the school board. So I hope that we can do this as objectively as possible, take deep breaths if we feel like we are bubbling over, and take the responsibility of what we're doing tonight as seriously and as objectively as possible. Thanks.
As a reminder, it's just one, like, these are all pieces of information this committee is getting. We've said that throughout. And so
we're allowed to weigh as heavily as we choose to as a committee, weigh this criteria, this set of criteria, in any way we wish as we make our recommendation.
Okay, and before we hand this over to Dr. Bellis, I thank you very much for those comments, and that actually there's a reason, there's a logical connection between what I'm going to go over. The data that I'm going to show is just to create foundational understanding for committee members on the issue of test scores and the connection to what it means low income performance, but also a concept of when we look at low socioeconomic, and I want to make sure that at least there's some foundational knowledge. This is just above and beyond. This is not part of the criteria that you're looking at. This is just to create in the conversation for today that everyone has at least an essential background knowledge to understand what, for example, our public comments bring up. So this is not comprehensive. This is just to show connections and correlations between test scores and two factors. When we talk about socioeconomic, there are two concepts in there. The economic side, when we say that a family has a low socioeconomic status, we're talking about a combination of two things. One of them is income, which we'll show. The other one is the socio part, the social part. And for us, that is aligned with parent education levels. When we use that socioeconomic determinant outside of education, there are other things. When you say low socioeconomic, there are more factors. But in education, by the definition, we are talking about two. Their income and parent education levels. So with that, when Ed Services presents information, they're going to be referring to data that is taken from the California School Dashboard. I don't want to steal their thunder. But it comes from these test scores. So we look at our CASP data or SBAC data. We get ELA and math. There are other test scores that we get too. But for the purpose of just establishing that common knowledge, I'm just going to focus on ELA and math. So for 24-25, you'll note that ELA is higher than math. This is consistent across the district and across student groups. And it's also consistent across the state of California. Generally, districts score higher in ELA than in math. I also want to call attention to a trend that as I go through the data sources, and I can do it multiple times, but I'm going to go pretty methodically, you're going to note that distinction. So if you take a look at ELA on the left and math on the right, just for the sake of purpose of walking through this data, we're going to call that a 12-point difference. That on the student performance, in terms of students meeting expectations, meeting standards, there's generally a 12-point distinction between ELA performance and math performance. So you can see that. Just real quickly, when you move the decimal, it's not exactly 12, but just in your mind, remember about that 12-point difference, and so that way you can track it as I go through the different data sets. So before I start, I just want to ask, are there any questions about, why we're going through this step, or questions about the definition of low socioeconomic? Okay.
Please use the microphone, sorry.
No, this is not in our packet. All of this is at the state website, and we can provide that information to you so you can click on it. The reason it's not in your packet is in order to replicate it, you would have to have familiarity with the state. I just have a lot of familiarity with it, but I can, afterwards, if anyone wants me to show them how did I do that, I will absolutely show you how to do that. So right now, this data shows all of our students. Every student who takes CASP and SBAC, all grades, which is 3 through 8 and 11th grade. This is how we do district-wide. So it's all students, not disaggregated in any way. The first factor we're going to look at is that economic status. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So I'm going to apply this selection of the socioeconomic disadvantaged students only. And so when we factor in the connection for all students, you'll note that there is a depressed score in how students who are identified as low economic, so low income, their families are identified as low income. And you'll note that although the scores change in generally, there is still that 12-point discrepancy between ELA and math. Okay, so that's our low socioeconomic families, because families provide us this data. Then I'm going to go to not socioeconomically disadvantaged. So these are families that don't indicate that they are low income by a few measures by which they could give that information to the district. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So you'll note that families who do not identify as being low income, the performance of these students, again, is highly correlated with income. So that 12-point difference is replicated even across higher and lower socioeconomic groups. All right, so that's the first part. 12-point difference, higher income, lower income, still a discrepancy in performance. All right, any questions before I move to, yes?
Where is the dashboard pulling from? Like, where's the information coming from?
Yes, so this is not the dashboard. This is a state website that is, it's the CASP SBAC results page. And so the state, all of that data goes to the state, and then they pull the dashboard data from state data sets. So they create this report specifically for the entire state? Yes. Okay. All right, any other questions? Thank you for that. Okay. So now I'm going to change the student group from economic status to parent education. Okay. Oh, wait, sorry. I just want to go back. Yeah. I just want to go back where we started real quickly. Students, and then section. Okay, so now we've gone back to where we started with all students across the district, not broken down by any demographic group. Now we'll go to parent education. And we'll go one by one through the different criteria. So families who identified as not, at least one parent having not completed a high school graduation or a high school diploma. So it's a little bit different. It's not that pure 12-point difference, but you can see, again, it's around 10 or 11 points. As we go up in education levels, so now the next group is someone in the home who identified as being a high school graduate. So again, the gap persists. This is a parent, at least one parent who identified as having some college. This group is at least one parent who is identified as being a college graduate. And then this is at least one family member, parent, who's identified as being a postgraduate or graduate school. Okay. So I'm good with that. One of the dangers of just even acknowledging these distinctions is then to take another step, which is to say, well, then it's always the case that just because something is highly correlated with income or socioeconomics means that that is somehow determinant. If without certain interventions and without additional supports in general, there is a lot of research that talks about how socioeconomic conditions can be highly predictive of long-term outcomes. That is true. What we do in not special education, though, that's one of our tools. What we do in education, though, that's why when the public comments were talking about the Title I schools, I don't like us to call like a school as being a Title I school, but it's something that we do. What's important to note is that it is a school like any other, with students and families like any other, except for the fact that the way that that school is funded through the district, they will get more resources because the need is greater. And that's the important thing. So when you hear people talking about Title I schools, let's just call them schools, and they happen to be schools that have a higher concentration of students with low income, or their families have low income backgrounds or low socioeconomic conditions. And because of that, if you take a look at the correlation between income and parent education level, those are some of the determinants that impact how the students then perform. I'll just say, I just looked real quickly at some recent research on this. If you want some more background, very recently, the Science Journal just released an article in June. It's volume number 392, issue 6803, where this again was brought up, and the title of it is "Patterns of Brain-Wide Associations Reflect Socioeconomics." And that's an accessible version of that was in the June 11th NPR story that talks about the conditions, how does that affect students' brain development. There is so much research in this area that is not the intention of today. The intention of today is to just give that common understanding of some of the terms that we will use, the impact of those terms, and what the correlations are between student performance indicators, which test scores are one, and some of those social determinants. Okay.
Castro, I think just to add, it's important to note that if a school does close that is Title I, if those students get dispersed and go to a potential neighboring school, that other school could also potentially now be Title I.
Absolutely, yes. It depends on how the students, the concentration, and some other factors, but that absolutely could be the case.
Please use the microphone. Sorry, we need it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So if a school the school isn't designated as Title I, if those students that are previously going to this other school now go to this school, that new school, the other school could become a Title I school.
Yes, and since we're talking about that, another factor that happens is just because a school was identified as being a Title I school 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that does not necessarily mean that as the demographic shifts occur at that school, that it will always continue to be identified as a Title I school entitled to those additional funds. Yeah. And yes, there's a World Cup game going on. Okay. All right. Any questions on that before I turn off my mic? Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting the committee members, Greg Bayless, Assistant Superintendent for Ed Services, thank you for having me. I will have the task of walking you through the series of slides. But with that background, I really appreciate both the chair's comments and Dr. Castro's comments about this data set. Since I'm new to the group, it feels a little strange to me to remind you about group norms and code of conduct, but I trust that that's all been effectively covered. Is that something you wanted to touch on? We can, okay, all right. Code of conduct. Everyone's signed on the dotted line there. Okay. So the California State Dashboard is not the platform that Dr. Castro just outlined here. It's the annual state updated dashboard that outlines a variety of metrics. Again, not all of our metrics, but a variety of metrics that the state has identified as key for the public to hold schools accountable for doing the job that we are asked to do. So the data, the school's dashboard utilizes that color-coded system. I think many of you are familiar with it, but nonetheless, that dial system, and you can see on all of our slides, most of our slides, I tried to include it just to remind you where the colors are. Is orange ahead of yellow, or is it ahead of red, et cetera. So it goes from lowest performance category to highest performance category. And something to note about those performance categories are that they aren't just pure absolute metrics of performance. They are always in relation to the year prior. So the state designates a color that takes into account both how you did this year and how you did this year relative to last year. So it's the state's attempt to try to communicate growth. It's not a perfect metric of growth, but it's at least an attempt to say we want to honor value add and growth over time rather than just a point in time academic performance metric. So the performance indicators here are academic performance. You can see English language arts and math, and now somewhat recently added science. Although that's sort of still in the somewhat nascent stages of being applied. English learner progress, and that is to track how well our schools, our district are supporting English learners or multilingual learners and their progress. Chronic absenteeism as a metric of engagement with school, and that's the frequency of student absences, and a student is identified as chronically absent if they miss 10% or more of the year. So if we have a 180-day school schedule, if they miss more than 18 days, they are designated as chronically absent. The suspension rate, the graduation rate in college career, it didn't outline definitions there, but I think it's worth spending a little bit of time. In our LCAP, we actually identify both the state's suspension rate on the dashboard, which is how many students are suspended. And so if somebody, like Jorge, is suspended one day, the metric ticks for him, and it doesn't change if he's then suspended 10 more days. So it's just one time. Has he been suspended one or more times? On our LCAP, we added, because we think it's important also to talk about the number of days, because those are two different metrics. Yes, we want to reduce the overall number of students that are suspended, but we also care about the overall number of days that he might be suspended, because that helps us understand whether or not our restorative justice practices are working or not. So, but that's a feature that's not on the dashboard. Our graduation rate, I think that's fairly straightforward, although it can get complex when you dive into it a little bit. 4-year cohorts versus 5-year cohorts, and where does a student fall? To which district is that metric applied if the student leaves in their sophomore year? So, nonetheless, we generally look at our 4-year cohort graduation rate metric. And then the college career indicator is probably the most complex, but arguably the most real world and nuanced metric on this dashboard. And it's essentially similar to the graduation rate metric. It's a capstone metric that says how well are students prepared for the next phase of their life after graduation. And it doesn't define success singularly. It defines success and readiness for post-high school academically, or even in terms of readiness for trades through CTE, pathway completion, through, yes, academic preparation and AP testing and scores on CAS, but also a variety of metrics, biliteracy, ROTC programs, all those kinds of things. So it's sort of a broad metric that the state says you're either prepared for college and career, almost prepared, or not prepared. So happy to answer questions on any of those before we dive in further. Any questions on any of those and how they're defined? Okay. All right. This is a summary of our student groups that the state tracks on the dashboard. And you can see the columns are the dashboard performance categories. Chronic absenteeism, again, 10% or more absence during the year. Suspension rate, as I mentioned, that's by student, not by number of days. English learner progress, are we getting our students to become reclassified as English proficient? When they, on their home survey and based on our assessments, they are identified as multilingual learners, or they're coming from a multilingual household. Their performance on the CASP in ELA and math, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more detail in just a minute. I already mentioned college and career and graduation rates, and I'll talk about the colors. But I did want to briefly talk about the ELA and math. On the dashboard, those particularly are not pure performance metrics. They are somewhat, looking for the right word, they are somewhat influenced by participation rates. So if we have a 100 student school, or if I have a 100 student group, I have to have 95 of those. I have to have 95% participation in order not to get the overall metric reduced. So I could have really high scores, but if I have 90% participation, the 5% of students under the 95% threshold are automatically given the lowest possible score. So then it reduces your metrics. So that's why it's not that I'm trying to sow doubt about these, but it's important that you know some of the ways the metrics are produced. So our participation rate is really critical. I'll offer that because there have been times in our past, not so much in our present, where our participation rates have really influenced our performance color. And they tend to influence, they have more of an influence on our performance color, again, very small, much less so than in years prior, on our student groups. Because you have to have 95% participation in not only at every school, but in every student group at every school as well. So that's why for those of you who wonder why we tend to take somewhat of a aggressive stance on all students test, you have the state ability to opt out, the allowance to opt out, but you will still test. We can still provide you tests. We are trying to get the most accurate read on how our students are doing academically. It's not just about trying to avoid a penalty in the dashboard system. It really is trying to get the most accurate data. So that 95% threshold applies to the academic performance categories as reflected by CASP scores. So now let's dive in.
Can I ask?
Sure, absolutely.
Pardon me. So in this current 2025 data, how many of those categories were affected by non-participation?
We tend to have we're slightly under the 95% threshold in students with disabilities.
Okay. That's the only category?
That is the only category from last year that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. We're still currently analyzing participation rates for this year, the 2026 CASP test, which will be reflected on the 2026 dashboard, which will come out in mid-October. Okay. So once again, the colors are a product of two things: performance in absolute terms, and in some cases as influenced by participation rate, and also how that performance is relative to the year prior. With red being the lowest performance rate, you can see where we have areas of challenge. You can see that our homeless and foster youth, and this is the case across the state, and I'm noting that not ever to give an excuse for our dashboard performance markers, but to provide context that these are challenges that we are responsible to address, and we work with county, we work with, in some cases with state organizations to try to get at these difficult, important, but long-standing and intransigent challenges in education. And you can see for some particular groups in math, so for foster youth, both in chronic absenteeism, homeless and chronic absenteeism, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. And then we also have the red performance level in math. And so these are district-wide, these are not school-specific, these are district-wide student groups. Whenever you see an NA, a not applicable, that means that there aren't enough numbers of students in that category in order to produce a metric. And usually that's done to preserve students' identities. When there's very small numbers, usually single-digit numbers, sometimes you can make assumptions or identify students, so the state has the practice, and we follow that practice of not identifying those publicly. So it's not that we're disguising a color that you could find on the publicly available website. The color is just not given by the state. Any questions on this page?
So I guess my question is on, let's just take the top line, all students. How would it be possible if they're orange in chronic absenteeism, orange in English learner progress, yellow in English language arts, orange in math, that they would be green for college readiness?
Because college ready, there's many different ways to be determined by the state as ready for college. So let's take the example of ELA. Well, actually, let me give you the more simple answer. This is all students, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade. If you dive into grade level analysis, we have significant differences by grade level. And you can see, I'm not remembering the exact percentage that we had district-wide, all grade levels for ELA. I'm sure you have it memorized, Dr. Castro. That was a lot of pressure.
If you're testing me, I think
apologize. It was. I remember the 12-point difference.
Yeah, 40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a much higher 11th grade rate than we do a 3rd grade rate, and that shows a couple things. You have value add over time. There's a lot of differences. So you can have, by the time students are graduating, they may have qualified for college and career ready through high performance in ELA or math. However, when taken all grade levels, it's sort of the distortion of the average. Does that make sense? What happens in averages? It
doesn't make sense, but I would also say, why would you even consider, other than the students that are going into college, whether they're college and career ready? Like, that doesn't make sense to include elementary school in that statistic.
Oh, I thought, no, you're right. I'm talking about the ways in which students can be identified as college and career. So maybe we'll spend some time diving into it. You can be identified as college and career if you meet or exceed standards in math and English in the 11th grade year. Yeah, it's only for high schools. So that means that if I then flip over to the English column, so I need to make sure I'm in the microphone. If I flip over to the English column, even though the district all grade levels is yellow, there are many students, a part of that yellow, that in their 11th grade year do very well and qualify for being identified as college and career up in their 11th grade year. So
something magical happens in the 11th grade year that they jump from being orange and yellow up to being green?
For some students, yes. But remember, there's probably 7 different ways students can be identified as college and career ready. So if you have students, let's take the counterexample. If you have students that are not performing at meeting or exceeding math and English standards in their 11th grade year, you can still be identified as college and career if you took and passed your A to G classes and you completed a CTE pathway. So maybe you didn't even participate in the test. You opted out of the test. You got the lowest possible score by not participating in the math and English test in your 11th grade year. You can still be college and career ready by virtue of other ways that the state identifies you. And maybe you took AP tests. There's a certain number of AP tests that you can take and pass in order to be identified as college and career ready. So I think it's a product of the multiple ways in which you can be identified by the state. Does that help?
And if I could just add, keep asking questions, because at some points we're going to say something, you're going to say, that makes absolutely no sense. Because a second ago you said this. For example, the conversation about like calling out chronic absenteeism, the state determined that chronic absenteeism only applies to students up to 8th grade. Chronic absenteeism, as an indicator, is not applied to high school students. We could get into a big conversation about why they made that determination, but when we look at chronic absenteeism as an indicator, it doesn't even include high school students. So I just want to keep encouraging you to ask clarifying questions as we go through this, because some of the way that the data is developed and reported and the factors that contribute to it sometimes seem counterintuitive, and that's because it is.
And Melanie, I see you have a question, but just to add to that, Dr. Castro, that the state has said what we want to do is measure student engagement. We're going to measure student engagement this way in elementary through chronic absenteeism, or we'll measure it this way through graduation rates in high school. I'm not defending that decision, but that's the philosophy of the dashboard. The thing we're trying to measure is this concept, and we'll measure it this way in elementary and this way in secondary. Yeah, Melanie.
I'm just thinking it might be a decent idea to clarify because sometimes blue could mean really high, but that could mean something good or it could mean something bad. Because if you were looking at suspension rates in African American students, it's in the blue, which technically means it's very high, but does that mean it actually a lot of African American students are
No, that's a
suspended,
great
or does that
question.
mean
Yeah.
it's like the opposite, right?
Well, it's not the opposite. So if you are blue so there are some things that you want. You want high ELA, you want math. You always want blue, but for something like suspension rate, blue is determined as a low metric. So, and I'm thinking that's same with chronic absenteeism. So all the colors apply equally. They're all the same. You want green, blue, but it's not a relationship between green, blue always means higher of something. It could mean lower of something. In the case of chronic absenteeism and suspension rate, it means lower. So, yeah.
But I thought you said homeless, obviously they have the highest, which is red.
Right.
Absenteeism.
That's right. So that means they have the lowest performance level because they have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you just said in chronic absenteeism and in suspension rate, blue is the highest indicator of that.
It's the highest performance indicator as in a positive performance. So if we have a positive performance, we have a low chronic absenteeism. We have low suspension rates. So it's a performance indicator color for us. Are we doing good at preventing chronic absenteeism and preventing suspensions?
So what you're saying is African American, in this case on suspension rate, is performing at the best level.
So that's correct.
So they have the lowest suspension rate of everyone. Okay. So
but I just want to add to that. Remember, it's not just they have the low suspension rate. It might mean they have a low suspension rate and you have improved from the year prior. It's always both those things. Yeah, thank you for letting us clarify that.
So when we're looking at this, because I work at a school, we have some acronyms, and the orange is like, oh no, and then the yellow is yikes. So it's like the oh no is like we got to get on it. So the orange foster youth, that would mean that foster youth are being suspended at a higher rate than English learners who are yellow, correct?
Correct.
Can we change that to her terms?
Yeah, this is, it's really good we're having this conversation. Again, Stephanie, everyone, I really appreciate those questions before we go further. It is, it can be confusing. And I really am glad you brought up that blue always means good, but sometimes good is a low number, a low percent. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned there's different the headings here, like chronic absenteeism. Absenteeism. I can't even talk today. Sorry. Don't apply to high school students, as an example. And I just kind of flipped through the pages here. There might be some value add if just at a future, maybe the next meeting or something, having, because it seems like there's these mean different things for high school, middle school, elementary possibility. I don't know how many are actually different. I'm just highlighting the one you mentioned about that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I can at least try to do that here. Chronic absenteeism, as Dr. Castro said, applies through 8th grade. Suspension rates apply K-12 through TK-12 through a whole system. EL, the LP, the English Learner Progress Indicator, that third column applies broadly. ELA and math applies any grade level that is tested, and our tested grade levels are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, so 3rd through 8th, and then skip 9 and 10, and then 11th grade year. The college and career indicator and the grad rate is only determined at the end of high school. So the college and career, upon graduation, upon exiting of those graduates, and which ones of the graduates are prepared for college and career. And graduating with a diploma is a prerequisite for being having a chance to identify as college and career ready at all. Yeah, thanks for that question. Anything else? Okay, happy to come back to any of this if it turns to mush in your head, as it would be completely normal. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is just go through somewhat quickly, if that's the desire of the committee. Chair, if you want me to slow down at all, happy to, but just to dive through each of the indicators for the schools. So what we just did, in contrast, this is district-wide by student group, and now this is school-specific, group agnostic. Okay, and these
Since we're looking at schools individually for potentially closing, I think it is important to look at them in depth right
Okay.
now. I mean, I don't know. Should we do a consensus thing? Do you all agree? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So these are elementary alphabetically. And so this is the Academy of Technology and Leadership in Satakoy. That's Atlas. This is a TK through 8 school. This is one of our 3 TK through 8 schools. Chronic absenteeism at the performance level of yellow. Suspension rate green. English learner progress green. Obviously no graduation rate for a TK8 school. No college and career indicator for a TK8 school. English and math are both orange, and science is yellow. So again, science has a little asterisk next to it because it's relatively new, and it's also not given in every single year that ELA and math are given, but nonetheless we'll treat it similarly to English language arts, math, and science. No problem.
Another quick question. Just on the chronic absenteeism, so just for a point of reference, you said 18 days per year equals chronic absenteeism.
Yeah, 10%.
So how does that break down then? Does that mean that goes from blue to green, or is that yellow? Or
Yeah,
where
great
does
question.
that fall on that line?
It has to do with your a school's again, it has to do with their starting point from last year and their rate relative to the broader state and what the rates are in the broader state. So if they are yellow, that means essentially they are doing fair, and they have a chronic absenteeism rate that is sort of right in the middle of average. They're not beating the average, and they're not under the average for the number of students that are chronically absent. It also could mean they were orange last year and they have improved. They've had attendance plans and their SARB meetings and those letters, and they've done attendance campaigns, and they were able to move it forward just one. So one of the things that gets disguised in a lot of this is the concept of value add. So would Atlas or any school, without all the efforts that Atlas or any school is doing, would they be at red? Does that population tend to be predisposed to be more chronically absent? So actually yellow is quite good because it's a significant value add at that school. And I think that's kind of what was referenced in public comment earlier about how this doesn't tell the whole story. Oh, so sorry. Great question, though. Anything else?
Kevin?
Yes.
I don't want to get ahead of you, but I noticed that there's a color bar up top. So for Atlas, is that referring, that color bar, is that referring to the prior year? I'm assuming that's trying to be green, or they're just decoration?
Oh, yeah, wow, that was loud, sorry. Just decoration. These are just clips from the actual site. So it gives you the color up at the top, and then it also gives you the dial. And I think the reason the state does that is for the colorblind among us, so you can see where the dial is, not just a color. Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Bayless, if I could just interject,
Sure.
I didn't want to interrupt. There is another level of analysis that we, again, if the committee wanted to get into to better understand this, what Dr. Bayless is talking about is these metrics are a combination of either the performance or change over time. The state calls that status and change. What was the previous year's status? And was the change from the previous year more positive or more negative? There's an entirely separate set of data. They're called 5x5s. And the 5x5s detail that phenomenon that Dr. Bayless is talking about. It addresses what the performance is and what the status and change were that resulted in the color identification. So at each layer, so this is one layer, you can continue to click more and more to get more detail. What we're trying to do is to say, regardless of what the combination is in terms of their performance, whether that was because like, for example, just like Dr. Bayless was talking about, there's a disguise here. Sometimes in orange, in particular for chronic absenteeism, they actually could have increased significantly from the year before, but because it hadn't met that threshold for the yellow color, they actually have improved pretty dramatically from one year to the next. But until the percentage is in the yellow category, it looks like, oh, they're not doing well, when in actuality, they could have increased significantly over the previous year. And that's just how the 5x5 works.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Stephanie, did you have a question, or did you have another question? Okay, thank you.
I understand the system now. The green means question. All right, took me a minute. Yeah, good. Well, I can do better then. I can get to blue. Yeah, what does white mean? NA? All right. I forget. Did we do Citrus Glen or not? We're on school number 2 of 27. So okay, Citrus Glen. Orange for chronic absenteeism, suspension rate. Orange, the LP, the English Learner Progress Indicator. Blue, no graduation rate, college career for any elementary. English language arts, yellow. Math, orange. Science, yellow. Okay. Moving on to, yes. Yes.
I just had a question about how the English learner progress is tracked. Did we talk about that?
I don't know if we talked about it in detail. Yeah, I apologize. The English learner progress is it's a metric on if students who are identified as multilingual learners or they're not English language proficient, are they making acceptable progress towards being reclassified as fluent English proficient. So that reclassified fluent English proficient, we call it RFEP. So the state monitors whether or not those students are progressing, and the goal is to have them RFEP as quickly as possible, because there's a strong relationship between being RFEP'd, being redesignated as English proficient, and academic success. And those students that do not, they're in our system for 5 or more years, 6 years, 7 years. We call those LTELs, long-term English learners, and there's the reverse is true. Long-term English learners who do not become classified English proficient do not have positive academic outcomes. So this is the accountability system to say, are you moving your English learners along in the trajectory towards English fluency? Great question. Thank you for that.
They take a test called the LPAC. That's how they figure that out.
Yeah, that was 3 acronyms in one answer. That exceeds our allowance. Okay, we are on.
We have a question from.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not looking for green. I apologize. I need to look for green.
It's all right. I was
Forgive me.
hiding it from you. So, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that once you go into each one of these little, whatever they are, thermometers.
Tiles, yeah.
I'll probably get my answer, but seeing that I'm just seeing this, isn't it a little bit weird to have data mixed from like a previous year to now year because the population decrease?
You are bringing up a fascinating question. So you're referencing this is how a school is doing, and when you talk about change or growth over time, usually we want to talk about cohorts of students. Are we looking at this group of students and this specific group of students again in the following year and tracking them? And that's not what this is doing. This is looking at just how is the school's systems, how are the school's approaches and mechanisms working in this particular area. Now, it could, for chronic absenteeism, each year, let's say in an elementary, you have you exit one grade level. So you are working with roughly the same group of students. Let's call it like 80% of the same group of students. So it's kind of a quasi cohort, but it's not a pure cohort tracking year to year.
So you're saying the population doesn't affect it at all? We're just looking at the school systems and how they run their programs?
Yeah, Dr. Castro, help me out on that one.
Yeah, I'll just go back to what Greg talked about, that there are some metrics where, actually, I don't want to go there. That'll be even more confusing. In general, yes, it is affected by the student groups, but what Greg was saying is that they are not. It's not about matched cohorts, comparing matched cohorts. It's about that cohort from the previous year. How do they compare with the cohort that follows? What'll make it really clear is let's just focus on high school. These are high school students, and it's a one-time. So when you have the seniors that in the college and career, it's how that senior class, what percentage of them met those college and career indicators. Done. Next year, go ahead.
Again, to your point, why mix last year's data with this year's if it's looked at just that one
really,
point in time?
Yeah, really important question. Let me come back to that. Let me focus on that high school piece. So in high school, it's just that one time. So of that cohort, what was their graduation rate? And then it moves on to the next cohort. The reason that in the elementary areas, it is the state is wanting to compare growth over time is because overall the state actually has a desire to move a part of our accountability system to the entire accountability system being growth related. And right now we are in between focusing on achievement as a static indicator versus growth, which is how much progress did that student or did that cohort make over time. And the state is in between 2 different worlds right now. As an aside, we have some teachers in the room. It's one of the reasons why the district years ago invested in being able to have some growth assessments. We call them MAP or NWEA, because a lot of the progress that students make is in that growth area. Just because they didn't meet a particular standard, when you look at how well kids are accelerating, even if they're maybe just a little bit behind where they're supposed to be, we care about how much they are growing. Because if their growth trajectory continues to keep at a particular rate, they will exceed at some point whatever that growth, whatever that achievement standard is. So that's, I know it's more than you were asking for, but that's what the state is trying to do. I didn't want to bring it up, but on the California School Dashboard, last year they started publishing a growth metric for the first time. So that way people who were interested could start to see where we are. When you go to our California School Dashboard website, you'll be able to see how they're tracking growth in ELA and math. So it is that what you're talking about. But our entire accountability system hasn't moved there yet. But these are the building blocks for us to get there.
And to get
Doesn't
back,
that seem like relevant information for our group, though, to look at that as well as?
We can. It's just so the answer is yes. Is it relevant? Yes. The reason why it's not front and center is because the state is just giving us, very similar to science. Science is not yet part of the formal accountability system, but they're giving us some lead time to say, hey, districts, when this is a part of the accountability system, this is how you're doing. Very similar to growth. They're saying, here's some data for districts to be aware. This is how you are achieving in terms of a growth metric, but it isn't a part of the accountability system. All these other metrics are the things that we are actually held accountable for now, and that's the distinction. Yeah, thank you.
You know, I just would add, I think the graduation case is a perfect one, because while anyone who's spent any time in high school knows each class can be very different year to year, the graduation rate still is a point of reflection for us to say, how good are our intervention systems? How good are our credit recovery systems? How good is our counseling system as a system, rather than looking at an individual year and comparing it to the previous year? It is a reflection on systems, not on comparing kids and students. So, great question, though. All right. We are on Elmhurst. And Dr. Castro referenced science. I think that's a really good point. If you notice, science stays the same color every single time at the top, that bar. That's because it's not formally a part of the accountability system yet. It has that aqua. I'm not quite sure what color that is. Just to demonstrate it's not fully a part of the system yet. Okay. Elmhurst, chronic absenteeism is yellow, suspension rate, yellow, English learner progress, orange, no grad rate, no college and career, English language arts, yellow, math, orange, science, green. I see a green card over there. I'm starting to look now.
From a few meetings ago, we noticed that Elmhurst lost a significant number of students to Mound. I believe it was somewhere like 91. And I'm wondering if that impacts these scores, and if we're able to tease any of that out in the future about where certain students go and the impact on the test scores.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what you looked at. You're probably looking at school of choice ins and outs. Does that sound right? Okay, so yeah, every school has ins and outs, and some schools have more outs than ins. Some schools have outs that tend to go to another particular school. So your general question is, do incoming students impact scores and outgoing students impact scores? The answer is undoubtedly yes.
I think I'm looking for maybe some specifics about what that impact is.
I can answer directly. We don't track the differential once a student leaves that school for whatever reason and they are at another school. All of their performance and indicators and metrics are now associated with their school, not necessarily their boundary school. Even if they are coming in from outside the district, as soon as they are enrolled in a particular school, we're just tracking that student at that school, not necessarily whether they were an inter-district, an intra-district school of choice. They're just tracked and accounted for as a member of that school. Yeah.
Okay. We are on EP Foster Elementary. EP Foster, chronic absenteeism is in yellow, suspension rate is green, English learner progress, orange, skipping graduation rate in college and career, English language arts in the red, mathematics in yellow, and science in the green. Okay, Juana Maria Elementary. Juana Maria, chronic absenteeism, again, is in that yellow band. Suspension rate, orange. English learner progress, red. Graduation rate in college and career, both skipped. And then English language, art, and math are both in the orange, and science is in the yellow. All right. Going to make sure I keep looking up to see if anyone has questions in between, but if not, I will keep moving forward. J. Sarah. J. Sarah, chronic absenteeism, green. Suspension rate, both green. English learner progress, no performance color. That means they don't have a sufficient student group size to generate a color. Graduation rate, college and career, skipped. English language arts, yellow. Math, green. Science, green.
If you scroll past all these slides, there's a summary slide that has everything. That might be easier than flipping through. That has everything.
Yeah, I'm happy to do whatever the committee would like. If you would like to go through each one.
Go to slide 37. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Slide 37.
Keep going, past the high schools, right there. It has everything there,
Right.
summarized by site. I mean, you could walk through it that way. You're not flipping. So it's suggestion.
No, that's a great suggestion. I think that was mine a few weeks ago, but nonetheless, happy to do whatever you would like. Chair?
Well, I mean, I feel it's fairly arbitrary. This is, maybe a more succinct way to look at the same data.
Yeah.
So unless there's a strong objection, why don't we try it? And if we don't like it, we can go back.
Great idea, Dr. Mirza. All right. So we are on.
I'm sorry, one more question.
Sure.
If we look at this chart, let's say it takes 10, 15 minutes, that means our break would be later than typical. Are we comfortable proceeding through the chart and then taking a break while we're on the roll, or any urgency among the committee? Okay. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, keep going. Let's keep going then. Thank you.
All right, onward. All right, I think we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. Juana Maria. I think we just did J. Sarah, and I think now we're on Lemon Grove. Okay. Lemon Grove, you can see chronic absenteeism there is red, suspension rate is orange, no English learner progress given the low size of that student group. English language arts is yellow, math is orange, science is yellow, and again, no college and career and grad rate. Lincoln.
Okay, now I see the chart is really helpful to me in seeing all this English language ELA progress NA. What percentage of students do you need to make it relevant?
Oh boy, that's a great question. It's not a percentage; it's a number. Is it something like 12 or 15? It's a fairly small number, but.
I'll take a look. Each indicator has a different threshold. So they have entire booklets for it. As you're going through, let me look in the booklet and see what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. But just for the guidance, the general guidance, it's not a lot. The threshold is not extraordinarily high. It's actually quite low. Okay, we are on Lincoln. Chronic absenteeism, red. Suspension, blue. Not applicable for the LP. ELA is orange, as is math, and science is NA. And that's interesting. That may mean that's a really rare one, as you can see, which probably means that we had opt-outs for science. So there was students that get that opt-out sometimes of math, but not of English, of science, but not of math, and so it's test by test. All right, we are on Loma Vista. Chronic absenteeism, orange. Suspension rate, green. LP, not applicable. ELA and math are both green, and science is blue. Moving one down, no questions. Montalvo. So I should be more specific about some of these schools. So back up to Lemon Grove. So far we've done 2 of our 3 K-8s. Our remaining K-8, TK-8 is Sunset. And I think it's important to note that Montalvo is one of our 3 dual language schools. If you want to star those right now, those being Montalvo, Will Rogers, and Sheridan Way. Those are our 3 schools that are exclusively dual language.
And just for people who don't know what that means exactly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we are going to get to special programs, but it might be helpful to know that now. So dual language means that students are taught in a percentage of their subjects in Spanish and a percentage of their subjects part of the day in English. And that percentage changes over each grade level, but nonetheless, it's designed to be you are learning bilingually, and you are functionally, the goal of the entire program from elementary all the way up through high school for the DLI program is to be bilingual.
And Dr. Perez, if I could interject, looking at the criteria from the state, generally, when no color is assigned, it's because there were fewer than 11 students in the cohort.
I was close. Yeah. I think that was the one number I didn't say. I said 10, 12.
You were correct on the average.
Yep, I was conceptually correct. All right.
So is that to say that all of these schools have fewer than 11 English learners?
That is correct to say that, yes, they have fewer than students that are non-RFEPT.
Okay,
oh, non-RFEPT. Okay.
But to be a little bit more precise, yes, what Dr. Palis is correct, but then it's also the number of students who are in a grade at that time who took the LPAC in the grade level. So all of those things, and if of that cohort there weren't enough of them in order to qualify, then they're not reported. So you could have more English learners than there, but if the number of those English learners who are eligible and should be taking the LPAC don't exceed, plus they have to have reportable results, like it has to, so there's a whole criteria. So in general, yes, smaller cohorts of English learners, but it's also those who are eligible as an English learner to take the LPAC at that time, plus those who have valid test results.
Which just proves how squirrely this data can be.
Yeah, Stephanie.
So I get that there are 3 dual immersion language elementary schools. I thought we didn't have dual immersion in middle and high school.
We do. We have a dual language program, a TWI, a 2-way immersion program that goes all the way TK through high school. So our 3 elementary DLI schools or TWI schools, 2-way immersion, dual language, those students go to Anacapa. Anacapa is where we house our middle school TWI program, and then from Anacapa they go to Ventura High School, and Ventura High School is where that doesn't mean that we don't have world language or language other than English at all of our high schools and at our middle schools, but the cohort of students that are taught core academic subjects in English and Spanish happen in secondary at Anacapa Middle School and at Ventura High School. Thank you for that question.
Stacy.
I'm wondering if there could be a way that we could indicate on this which schools are also testing students in SDC classes, since not all of these schools have students grades 3 through 5 that are testing from an SDC class.
If I'm understanding your question correctly,
SDC special ed.
Yes, SDC are like full day special education
That's
programs.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Later on in the presentation, I'm showing, or we're listing where those SDC programs, those full day special education programs are.
Specifically the students that are testing, because I know there are some schools where they only have a small percentage of students that are just in like K through 2nd. So those students wouldn't be the ones taking the test.
So just another nuance, when I showed you the data from the CASP website, there are entirely other modules, and one of the modules, and I can't make this determination without knowing that student with their IEP, but in the IEP it's going to designate whether they're taking the traditional CASP test, ELA or math, or the alternative assessment. Part of the reason that we don't end up looking at those data sets is for the same reason that even in the larger cohorts, we don't report those results. Many times, because that cohort is so small, we wouldn't have the alternative assessment results to disaggregate. It would be that there were 6 students in that cohort that tested that year. We wouldn't even be able to take a look at that because it wouldn't be publishable. Yeah.
Another question? Oh, okay. Okay, I think we left off at. Oh, is there another question? No. I'm really focused on the green now, so I'm. Yeah. If any of you have a salad, that might confuse me as well. Okay. All right, we're on Montalvo. No, we just did Montalvo, excuse me. Oh, no, I don't think we did, because I preface it by saying it's a DLI school. All right, chronic absenteeism is yellow. Suspension rate, blue. English learner progress, yellow. ELA, math, and science are all yellow for Montalvo. Mound. Mound is one of our 2 schools that don't have a boundary, as was indicated by public comment prior to the start of at the beginning of our meeting. So Mound, chronic absenteeism orange, suspension rate blue, English learner progress not applicable, ELA, math are both green, and science is blue. Pierpont Elementary, orange for chronic absenteeism, blue for suspension rate. The LP is absent. ELA and math are both green. Science is blue. Poinsettia. Chronic absenteeism is orange. Suspension rate is yellow. LP absent. ELA and math are both blue. Science is green. Portola. Portola is orange for chronic absenteeism, orange for suspension rate, green for LP, green and green for ELA and math, and yellow for science. Sheridan Way. Sheridan Way is red for chronic absenteeism, yellow for suspension rate, red for English learner progress, red for ELA, yellow for math, and yellow for science. All right, Sunset is our the third of our 3 TK8s. Chronic absenteeism is yellow, suspension rate green, learner progress, English learner progress red, ELA orange, math orange, and science yellow. Okay, and to our final school, and this is our third of 3 DLI or TWI, two-way immersion schools. Chronic absenteeism is orange, suspension rate blue, English learner progress is red, ELA yellow, math orange, science yellow. Okay. That was our elementary and TK8 set of schools. Moving on to Anacapa, moving on to secondary, middle schools and high schools, unless there's any questions. Okay. Anacapa, and again, Anacapa houses our middle school two-way immersion program. Chronic absenteeism is yellow, suspension rate and English learner progress are both green. ELA and math and science, all 3 of those are yellow. Balboa Middle School, chronic absenteeism is yellow, suspension rate is orange, the LP is green, ELA and math are both orange, science is yellow. For Cabrillo Middle School has chronic absenteeism of orange, suspension rate is green, English learner progress is red, ELA and math are both green, science is yellow. For data, chronic absenteeism is yellow, suspension rate is green, English learner progress orange, ELA yellow, math orange, science green. Okay. Moving on to our high schools. We have, again, we have 2 sort of boundary-based schools. We have 1 non-boundary-based school, Foothill. So we generally call those our 3 comprehensive high schools, although there are some differences. They're not totally equivalent in terms of their comprehensiveness. And all schools have differences in terms of what they, their course offerings, athletic offerings, et cetera. But nonetheless, we say our first 3 are comprehensive high schools. El Camino High School is our independent study middle college on the campus of Ventura College. It's designed primarily to be both independent study and community college based, where students can earn community college credits and hopefully upon graduating high school also graduate with a degree from Ventura College. And Pacific High is our alternative high school, primarily housing our students that need support for credit remediation and to stay on track for graduation. Okay, Buena High School. Chronic absenteeism, as Dr. Castro mentioned earlier, is not covered, so I'll just skip that for all of the high schools. Again, the state has said we measure engagement, student engagement, through graduation rates at the high school, and so that's where we'll see it shifted to the right-hand side of the page. Suspension rate for Buena High School, green. The LP is green, ELA is green, math is yellow, science is green, and now for the two new indicators for the high school, college and career readiness is blue, which is the highest on the far side of the dial. Graduation rate is green. Foothill Technology, suspension rate is blue, not enough English learners to be calculated in that metric. ELA and math are both blue, science is green, college and career and graduation rate are both blue. For Ventura High School suspension rate is green, the LP is blue, ELA is green, math is orange, science is NA, and so
I was waiting for this.
Okay, yeah. The state says you have to take science sometime. It's up to the school to determine when you take it. You can take it as, typically it's either as a junior or as a senior. So some schools say, hey, we want you to take it as a junior because you're more likely to be in, the majority of students are more likely to be in a science class in their junior year, so we want you taking the science test that year. Some schools say, no, we have a lot of students that take 4 years of science, so they'll also be in a science class in their senior year, so let's wait and do it the senior year. So it's a school-based decision. Deidre, good thing you're here. Do we have any additional comments on the science decisions?
If I can just share real quickly, part of the reason why when we were looking at student groups, that threshold is 11. But when you're looking at a cohort for one of these metrics, that cohort size is any cohort that's less than 30. There were no student cohort groups that in excess of 30, which is why there's not a color reported.
And there are, and I can't remember if it's this year, and Deidre, no pressure if you don't remember either, but there are sometimes schools change. They say, hey, we took it last year as juniors, we're going to change that. Next year, we're going to have them take it as seniors, so there's a gap. And it's not like it's a commitment for all time where you have to, a school has to determine that the science test will be taken in the junior or senior year. It can change. And I think we did have. And it can be challenging to get seniors to do things.
Greg, if you can just repeat for the record what Deidre said, so that way then.
Deidre, I apologize. Deidre Menars is our director of secondary, so she's really in the trenches on all these things. So she said that if a school has made a decision that juniors will take the science portion of the CASP, if some students don't, or they're absent or they opted out or whatever, the next year when they become seniors, sometimes we try to collect their scores and have them test that year. But again, that can be a trick at the end of the senior year. Compliance drifts off.
Just to point out, Buena and Ventura should not be here because this committee is not considering those schools. So that's our fault. We should have excluded those. Just point of reference.
Also, as a point of reference for the other schools, may be valuable nonetheless. So, excuse me. So now we are moving on.
Oh, sorry. Before you leave high school, where do the students who get their proficiency exam, high school, do they count as college career ready, or is that still a VUSD score?
Help me understand your question. Sorry.
So, is that still a thing, the proficiency exam? If you don't graduate high school, you can go back and still get a proficiency?
Oh, okay. I thought at first you were talking about the California high school exit exam. That was something that happened a long time ago. So you're talking about for students that do not graduate with their cohort the students that don't graduate with their cohorts, so they then move on to potentially adult continuation school, or they go get a job and they come back and they get take a proficiency exam. The answer is yes, but it doesn't change
It
our
doesn't affect
no.
VUSD. Okay.
Unless it happens. Antonio, do you want to?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to say again, conceptually, that's correct. It doesn't help us, but it can hurt us if they were supposed to graduate and they did not graduate, and they were still enrolled as a part of that cohort. Then that could affect our overall graduation rate, even though later on they could be outside of the system and get their proficiency. That still hurts our overall graduation rate. If
Explains why some of these, like Ventura is green, or graduation rate green for Buena, slightly lower than the other high schools.
I think where that really shows up, it's not necessarily like if you take a look at the graduation rate for Pacific High School, that's probably where it shows up the most because of although generally, in data you could speak to this, generally that cohort is very stable, but it has more fluctuations of enrollment at different times of the year than you would have at any of the other high schools. So that's where that graduation rate issue is going to show up the most is at Pacific High School.
Okay.
And this is a good opportunity to let me finish and then I'll mention Pacific High School at a little more length. El Camino. Suspension rate is blue, no English learner progress indicator. ELA is blue, math is yellow, science is blue, college and career is blue, graduation rate is blue. Okay, so once again, Pacific High School is our alternative high school that predominantly serves students who fall off track for graduation, so they're credit deficient. They typically, there's sophomore, juniors, and seniors. Students can go back to their high schools once they catch up and graduate with their cohort at their prior school. So that's what Dr. Castro was referencing. There's far more ins and outs at Pacific High School than at other high schools. And so again, this population is not a perfect reflection of all the populations that are at the other schools. It's designed to serve credit deficient students. So the suspension rate is orange, LP is yellow, ELA and math are both orange, as is science. College and career is red and grad rate is yellow. And again, I want to speak to those things. So the goal is to help students graduate. And that is, it's not that we don't value the other goals, college and career readiness, all those things, but it really is, that's the big push, is to get them to graduate on time. There aren't a lot, they don't have access to a lot of the pathways for becoming college and career ready. They have pathways to some, but not all of them. So for example, we don't offer AP tests at Pacific High School, so that therefore they have one fewer pathway to achieve college and career readiness. So I wanted just to add that note. And then of course graduation rate, even though at yellow is lower on the performance band, if you look at value add in terms of alternative high schools for credit deficient students, it is a model school and has an incredibly high graduation rate. And she's smiling because she was the former principal there for many years. So a lot of credit goes to that. So again, that's another way in which the the color itself does not tell the whole story.
Yeah, and Greg, I'll just add to that because I have the stat up. Just for example, although the color is yellow, Pacific High School's graduation rate for last year was 87%, whereas the entire state, for just graduates in general, was at 91.5. So Pacific High School as a continuation high school with an 87% graduation rate, when the state all graduates is at 91.5, that's pretty good.
All right, Kristen.
Can you touch base a little bit on suspension rates? Because my understanding is that the state changed. Basically, it's very difficult, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very, very difficult to suspend. So if you could just kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. The state has allowable suspension criteria. And so something that for high schools that used to be, maybe in our era when we went to high school, that used to be allowable to be suspended for, the state has eliminated that as an allowance. So the most important one is on the list. It's alphabetized A, B, C, D. It's K. We call it K. K is defiance. So a student tells you no. A student tells you more than no, maybe more colorful terms. And so that's K. It's not a suspendable offense. It's not a legally suspendable offense. If it's laced with vulgarity and profanity, okay, that touches on another letter. If it includes some threats or some harassment, that touches on another letter. But if it's just a no, hey, need you to get to class, Melanie? Okay. We're kind of stuck now, so I've got to work the administrative dark arts to see if I can get you to go to class. Do you want to go to prom this weekend, Miss Lindsay? All right. So yes, and I don't want to make light of something that is serious. This is something that is somewhat hotly contested. It does produce some tension because in some ways, some people have talked, I just want to be really transparent about this. Some people have said to me, well, a low suspension rate or a high performance color doesn't necessarily mean things are going well. Because maybe you are under suspending, maybe you have chaos, but you just don't have the administrative wherewithal to figure out how to suspend and discipline. That is one view. And I don't want to defend it or attack it. I just want to to acknowledge that is a view. Another view is, well, are we as a staff, do we work on having quality relationships with students so that things never get to the point of needing to suspend? Do we, when I suspended Jorge at the beginning of this committee meeting for one day, do I bring him back, sit him in my office and say, Jorge, welcome back, really glad you're back. Let's forget about what happened, new start. Love you, Jorge. Let's have a great day. So he's giving me the K now. He's giving me the K. So it has to do with how you manage student misbehavior, how you get to collaboration with students, particularly in secondary where they're young adults and they can tell you no and they can walk off campus. So I think that's also really valuable to consider as well. And also students that are suspended are not in class. Students that are not in class, whether they're chronically absent or suspended, are not learning. And there is a very straight line relationship between being at school and doing well. It's not a perfect straight line, but it is one of the few things in education that we can point to fundamentally and say this is research-based. Attendance tends to produce results. All right, I think we are moving on. Any greens out there? Kristen, still green? Okay.
Yeah, so let's 10. Okay, so if 10 minutes feels comfortable to everyone, we'll come back at, look at 18 after. Okay. See you then, thank you.
If we can ask the folks in the public area to please have a seat, we're going to get started. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Bayless, is this still you?
Unfortunately, yes, it's still me. I apologize. Maybe that's why there was some absences today. Saw me on the agenda. I don't argue with them. All right. This slide is just referring to the smarter balanced assessments. I don't know if we need to go into too much detail. It's everything that we've been talking about. The smarter balanced assessments are the ELA, the math, the science tests. So, okay. Happy to answer questions on that if you would like. All right, now here we're getting into the slides that are difficult to see and read from afar, but this is another way of looking at the data about the academic portions of what we just looked at. So remember, we looked at many different tiles. Tiles had to do with engagement, had to do with sort of college and career outcomes, et cetera. So now we're just going to dive specifically into English, language, arts, and math. And again, even though science is a part of CASP. It's not yet a formal part of the system, so we're just going to look at English, language arts, and math. And we're going to break down the levels of student achievement. And so what you have here for every school are 4 columns. Standard exceeded, standard met, standard nearly met, standard not met. And Deidre, are these the new titles or are these the old titles? The state changed.
They're from the 24-25.
Okay. The state, I think I probably just confused you all. There's still going to be 4 categories of performance, but the state is renaming them, I think, for next year. I think these are the...
Greg,
yeah.
I can confirm these are the correct titles for the 24-25
24-25, okay.
Do you all have this in your packet? You do, okay.
Okay.
And I just wanted to affirm what Greg just said about, he used the term achievement. We were spending time on the dashboard, which was a mix of lots of different things, including status and change. Now we're going back. We're going back to where we started at the beginning, where we're just looking at achievements. And these are those achievement bands. So standard exceeded, standard met, standard nearly met, standard not met. Straight achievement.
One of the things that in Ed Services we look at is, of course, how many students are meeting or exceeding standards. So those first 2 columns, if we look at Atlas, for example, that first row, we add those up, we say 48% of students pass, or they're at least at what we would say is grade level, or they're meeting standards for that grade level, so 47%. So we add the first 2 columns. However, we also look year to year at the percentages. Are we getting movement? Even though maybe that first 2 column additive percentage doesn't change, are we getting more students from standard not met into standard nearly met? And we also look at year to year. We look at 3rd grade one year and 4th grade, even though it's not a perfectly matched cohort, because we have some students drop out, some new students come in. We do look at those things. That's not shown here. I just wanted to give you an example of, again, this doesn't tell the entire story. It's one of many layers that tells, gives you a picture. So what I think might be best is if we're just looking at those first 2 columns. You of course, again, I noted that those 3rd and 4th columns are really important because we're trying to make sure that we have a decreasing number in both, but hopefully year to year we have students that are in the far right column moving over to the left. So Atlas, a 48% standard exceeded rate. Citrus Glen, 31, 32, you can see how that works. So you can see the relationships between these 4 columns. So, Chairman Yaski, how would you like me to go through these pages?
Yeah, I don't think we need you to do line by line.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my gut. I mean, we can, the chart I think is clear enough unless someone objects. Okay, so I think both for ELA and math,
That's correct.
we can use the data as we see it, unless there's something you want to explain that's different about the math.
I think one thing I could add is this will come back into play when we're looking at the scoring and ranking criteria. One of the criteria is looking at ELA and math in combining those 2 columns that say standard nearly met or not met, and how far those 2 columns combined compared to the district-wide total for those 2 columns.
Right, so for our purposes, as looking at this as school closure information, I think that's the relevant piece, yeah. Okay, so let's just take this and move to the criteria page. Yeah.
Do you want to move to the criteria page, or the next set of slides has to do with special programs at each school?
No, special programs,
Okay,
yeah, thanks.
okay. Yeah, Stephanie.
I
No, don't apologize,
maybe
please.
I'm like taking these too literally, but my question is, like, using the example of Pacific High has an 81% graduation rate. Get closer. So if Pacific has an 81% or 87%, was it 87% graduation rate, and yet if you look at ELA, for instance, only 25% of the students are either meeting or exceeding the standards, in ELA, and none of them are meeting or exceeding the standards in math. How are they graduating?
Great question. So I'm going to give you as well-rounded an answer as I can, and I want to preface this by saying these are not excuses; these are facts for anyone who's spent time in secondary.
And Ms. Menares has her hand up.
Deidre, why don't you come on over here? We'll share a mic, because this will touch on your area of expertise. So, first and foremost, the results in the results, particularly in high school, can be confounded by motivation. Persistence on the test, whether or not you did you just burn through it, you didn't finish it, somebody calls you back in to finish, but you just sort of like, no, I'm done, and I can't. So there is that factor, and those, I see Melanie nodding her head, so there is an element of that. How much it's an element, I can't quantify for you. But that is one way, and I'm, again, not a defense, but just a description. That is one way where I can be achieving in my class. I can be doing everything for Ms. Menares that she wants me to do. I can be reading. I can be turning in homework. And then I can just say, this test means nothing for me. It's an annoyance. I hate it. And I wanted to opt out, but I can't. I'm not 18. My parent wouldn't opt me out. And I know that if I even opt out, I have to take another test. So I'm just so that is a feature, that is a fact. Again, I can't quantify it for you, but that's one way. Do you want to add to that?
I think he said more eloquently than I would. Motivation in the test is low. We're not permitted to use that test as a grade, like it's not part of their passing or failing. So once they learn that, they would rather focus on other things. They'll sit there politely for the test, but what they put on the test isn't necessarily, it's, remember the bubble where we used to bubble whatever we want? Well, they just click, whatever they want just to get through it. So there's that factor, as Dr. Bayless explained. And participation rate is lower at Pacific High School in general. So we do get dinged at Pacific High School for that as well.
So I think that is a really important feature. As a student, I can choose to do well here, but I know that this has no meaning for my life. It has no meaning. I already have plans for myself or not, and I just don't need to do that. The other part on the math side is a little more complicated because the test given in the 11th grade year has standards that they don't go all the way through, let's say, Math 3. But I can still graduate with a collection of math courses that I might get to the test and I might not have seen all that. Or I might have seen it a long time ago and I'm doing calculus and maybe I just sort of forgot. So there's some element of that, whereas I'm not trying to say that is quantifiable, but that is a truth. Melanie, you can also, is there any other secondary folks in here? Anything else that might influence a way in which somebody can graduate and pass and maybe even be college and career ready, but just not perform on the test?
No. And maybe because I feel very attached to the school still, I'll just say that the students' performance in the classrooms are not equivalent to what they're doing on the test. So we have very bright students in all of our schools. Pacific is also one of those schools where we have very bright students. But they do the work for the teachers. They have great relationships with those teachers. They could care less what the state thinks about them. So that's just one of the realities of the students at Pacific High School, and their focus. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember because I think you covered part of it, but if I think of it, I'll...
We do try to have incentive programs to try to motivate students. I know that there's been some success recently at Ventura High School, for example, for offering a grade bump. If you are in a certain grade band, a letter grade in your math or English class, and then you perform at meet or exceeds levels, Those are very administratively burdensome. They're worth it so long as the teacher agrees to it. It's totally at the teacher's discretion. You can really only do it if all the teachers agree to do it, because you can't say like, well, I got that opportunity, but she didn't because she was just happened to be in a different class. So we try as much as possible to incentivize students, like, hey, we'll duct tape your principal to the wall if enough. So lots of different things. And I think, Melanie, you were in that business for a while.
Yes, we gave cookies. If you took your time on the test, you weren't one of the kids that finished it in 15 minutes or less, you got cookies at the end of the test, provided by the cafeteria, so we were in compliance. I've offered to be duct taped to the wall, like all kinds of ways to incentivize the kids to take it as seriously as we do.
And then just one more nuance. I think, Stephanie, your original question was related to graduation rate. Pacific High School students, they get a diploma, but they're not A through G. The majority of the students, I would say 99% of the students do not take the honors courses. They don't get those bumped in levels. But they do get the high school diploma.
And just as an example, to be A through G, you have to have 2 years of the same world language. We don't offer world language because that's not a requirement for graduation. It's one way you can achieve a certain graduation requirement, but it's not the only way. And so it's not because those students are incapable, unable. It's just that that's not the goal of the school. And given the size, that we can't offer the full portfolio of master schedule courses in the master schedule. Okay, great question.
Stacy.
Yes.
I'm very sorry.
No
I'm going
apologies.
to beat a dead horse, but on this particular page with all the test scores for language arts and math, it still doesn't encapsulate the schools. Not all of the 17 elementary schools have special education population on them that are taking these tests. And I would really like to see some asterisks or something to indicate which schools have students in special education full day taking these assessments.
So I think one thing that's important, I know Dr. Castro, you might want to build on this, is that we have special education, and I know you're specifically talking about SDC, full day special education students, but we have special education students everywhere in our system. They're at every school. We have SDC classes at some of our schools, and depending upon the intensity of the needs of the student, they take a different test, but all are tested. Antonio?
Yeah, the only thing that I can add goes back to my previous comment, which would be, let's assume that those SDC students are not taking the alternative assessment. Let's assume they're taking the SBAC. We would end up in a very similar place. As soon as we disaggregated them as a student with a disability and then pulled out their performance against the general population, you would end up in a similar place where you still wouldn't have enough of that cohort for it to be reportable and for us to discuss. It would end up being one of those NA sections because it would just be too small of a cohort to disaggregate.
I'm not looking for their scores. I'm just looking for acknowledgement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just these schools have these students testing. I don't want any other information. I just want that to be acknowledged.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can, I think in our next series of slides, we can do that, and then we can, depending upon how the committee would like to proceed, that can be denoted, or you can note it manually in your script. So,
Yeah.
looks like we answered the question.
Yeah, and I'll just...
Neil, this is Neil Varani, our Executive Director of Special Education. I thought maybe we were going to go deeper into some questions, but sit tight. I want you to know. Yeah, stay here.
Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be my question, is kind of dovetailing on what the previous question was, what percentage of students, I think it would be helpful to know, in each of these schools are on an IEP or are getting special education, because I do think that some schools probably have a higher percentage than others, and that it would seem to me would...
What I will offer there is that I don't disagree with you, and I want to provide information that you feel is relevant. However, on the surface, while that seems relevant, it can also be very misleading. So I can have a large number of students with IEPs, however, they're on consult, or they just have speech and language, and which it totally does not affect academic performance in these categories. So then there's the distortion of, if I just am looking at IEP numbers, it's really what kind of IEPs are we talking about? What kind of services are those students receiving? What kind of qualifications do they have? So that's why the number can be very distorting as well.
And if I could just add, this is part of why we went and spent so much time on the socioeconomic piece of how the data plays out and how that's correlated with student performance. When we look, this goes back to one of the conversations we had a couple meetings ago, an unduplicated student, when we're calling for funding purposes, an unduplicated student is your low income, your English learner, or foster youth. Okay, so that's an unduplicated student. Part of the phenomenon of why we focus on low income or low socioeconomic status is there's a duplication effect. There happens to be a larger number of students with disabilities who are also low income. There's also, from an English learner perspective, and foster youth for sure, because if you're foster youth, you're already in that group. Those three groups, there is duplication, higher duplication across those groups, which is why the state says, from a funding perspective, we are going to give you the funding in an unduplicated manner, because the need is often duplicated across those student groups. So if you're looking for, from a school performance perspective, if you're trying to look at what is the thing, what factor, what phenomenon is going to be one of the things that most affects student performance at that school, the biggest variance is attributable to socioeconomic factors. So if you're trying to look at those schools, if we organize these schools by the percentage of students who are lower socioeconomic, you would see the patterns of performance from the students that have the highest concentration of unduplicated students to the lowest concentration of unduplicated students. You would see that it would be highly correlated with the overall performance trends of that school. That said, every time I say that, I do want to you always hear me say, part of why we work so hard as public schools is so that way the demographics do not equal the kid's destiny. It is something that we work to make sure that demographic issue does not define who they are and what opportunities they have. It is a threshold, a bar that that has to be overcome. So again, I just wanted to share, of all the things, if you're looking for what is the thing that is the most likely, it's going to be found in that socioeconomic factor. And in that, you will have higher numbers of students with disabilities. And in that, you will have higher numbers of English learners in that group.
I thought I saw another question. Oh, Kate.
I was going to ask if it's safe to assume that we just don't have a large enough special ed population that are testing to affect. Are you worried about the effects of the test scores from the students with IEPs or students in special ed on this chart or these charts?
I think what I'm worried about is we've kind of, not to say this in a negative way, but kind of poked holes in all of these numbers that kind of to the point of some of the speakers earlier, how relevant are the test scores to what we're doing? I mean, I think it's a broader concern that we have, but I think if you look at it statewide, it's probably, I don't know where we compare, but we look at the state performance as having dropped as well. So to me, I'm just trying to kind of can we all agree maybe on the fact that I don't know that test scores are the best way to determine whether or not a school should close. In fact, I'm really concerned whether or not we even consider test scores at all.
Which goes to my point, and I hear what you're saying. My fear is the credibility of the committee and its recommendations, that if we don't look at test scores and we just say, nah, it's not relevant to what we're talking about, that it will undermine the validity or the credibility of the recommendations that we make, because it is one thing that people can grab onto and they see it as a tangible, and it is assigned a lot of information. And so I feel it's valid to look at for that in that context. And again, we can give it as much weight as we want to when it's time for us to make our recommendation. And, it could be that we all agree with what you've just said and we disregard most of it. I think it does give us a bigger picture about what are these schools like and what's individual to the schools and to the populations they serve.
And I think that if all the test scores were equal and it were apples to apples comparison, I would agree that that would be a valid tool to utilize, a valid resource to consider. But since it looks like these are very, very far from apples to apples comparisons, it's hard to evaluate how much weight to give, just using the Pacific High School example, right? And so where does that end? Is it in middle school where kids suddenly feel like, I don't care about the test score, right? Or is it only in certain high schools? Or does it really have, it's kind of the age-old nature versus nurture, right? Is it because you happen to have a teacher who really cares about that and kind of drums it into your head and that's what you're focused on all year? Or if your teacher isn't that concerned about it, that maybe they're not taking it as seriously or that it's easier to blow off? I mean, I don't know. To me, it's because it is not a scientific measurement, it doesn't add as much value as many of the other considerations.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think I just feel like we can't not look at it. So.
And Chair Moransky, if I could just add, winding back the clock, we knew that today was going to be challenging for this reason. Just a reminder, when we were sitting, Asan and I in particular, and then other members of the team over time, when we've sat with the School Services of California representative, she also just wanted to convey to this group, because she's worked with many districts across the state, it is a data set in the same way, a different data set, but in the same way that you may give different weight to other data sets. Some of the fit, results, for example, you may think, I'm not sure how relevant that is, but you took a look at it, you use it from a discernment perspective, and just as you stated, it is entirely up to the committee to determine how much weight, if any, that result weighs into your ultimate recommendations. But again, the Student Services California representative just wanted to make sure, just as you stated, that the community, because there are members of the community that do have questions, also care about is it, the way that we rank schools matters to members of the community, that we gave this committee the opportunity to review and make whatever decisions the committee wanted to make.
Okay, let's find my way here. I believe we are here at special programs. Okay, so I won't read this, but it's important that all VUSD schools have special programs. Some have special education special programs, some have special CTE programs, etc. So the special programs that we're talking about now are special education programs. Just to differentiate between the title and what we're going to talk about now with special education specifically, which is why I asked Executive Director Neal to be here in case you had any questions. So those, we can talk as you see those in the list. Feel free to ask questions. But the secondary curricular programs, as I mentioned, whether it's a CTE program or a music program, et cetera, all can be moved, provided at the other site there's sufficient space. So, and again, to dovetail, Stephanie, with what you said, I don't know how helpful this will be, but we can move programs anywhere, pending space availability. So, just as a reminder, we have 3 TK8 schools. So, let's dive in. And this, we tried instead of elevating every single possible little program that a particular teacher might have, we're trying to look at broadly 30,000-foot level at the schools, not to disguise anything, but to just give you a general sense of what is broadly special about each school. And schools that have more bullets aren't more special than schools with fewer bullets. It's just whether or not they have things that might categorically, from a district perspective, designate them as a particular program. So, Atlas, good example. It's a TK8. Citrus Glen is not. Atlas has a Leader in Me program. Citrus Glen also has a Leader in Me program. There are some differences, but nonetheless, they both have well-developed Leader in Me programs. Atlas has an EIC, an Early Intervention Childhood. That's a preschool for special needs students. On their site, they have a Jumpstart site. That's our district preschool. Not all of our sites have not all of our elementary sites have EICs or jump starts. And then I just put in white just to differentiate the our contracted partners that provide after-school daycare or after-school programs. So YMCA at Atlas, LPCC, Las Posas. I'm totally blanking on the CC. Las LPCC, Las Posas Children. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, that should have been relatively easy for me to get, but
those are not district programs.
These are not district programs. There are partners, and they lease space, buildings, and serve students, and so it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. EP Foster thought it was noteworthy to say they have a reading coach on site, an additional reading coach outside of an intervention teacher. Not all sites have that. You saw per the scores that was something that the LCAP pays for, given their needs. Ocean is our after-school program. That they have the annex. It's the blue building in the back that you drive by, and so that's not all sites have a after-school specific building on their campus, and EP Foster does. EP Foster has a Jump Start program. It's one of our handful of sites that has a Jump Start. Moving on to...
I'm sorry, can you refresh my memory?
Sure.
It's the end of the day, and the acronyms, LCAP?
Oh, okay. It is my pleasure to talk to you about the LCAP. The LCAP
ELOP.
is the Local Control Accountability Plan. It's we get money from the state based on the number of unduplicated students we have. So for every unduplicated student, we get above and beyond the base amount of money. Unduplicated student to my left, non-unduplicated, the state gives 10,000 base, and then if it's unduplicated, English learner, homeless foster, low income, the state gives additional money. We got supplemental concentration, so 10,000 for him. It's not accurate, but ballpark. Now, and 13 for him. The state requires us to write a plan for how we're going to spend that 3,000 additional to help him achieve at a higher level, given the fact that he is in a student group that has traditionally underachieved. So it's a specific plan, yeah. We meet 4 times a year. Love to have you there. We have food. It's a process by where we get input from the... oh, sorry. We moved on. All right. LCAP. ELOP, English, sorry, not English. Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. That's another state. Those are categorical funds that can only be spent on in that program. It's designed to be an academic intervention, providing services for students, particularly targeting students who are low income students, academic interventions, and they stay in an extended school day program. We also have a fee-based ELOP program for those students that don't qualify for the free, but it's been rebranded as Ocean, but it's after school.
And Annex is now formally known as Annex the Cove.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's right. That was a board-approved change. Okay, thanks for stopping me. I appreciate it. I apologize for glossing over those. So we are now moving on to Elmhurst, Juana Maria, and J. Sarah. So you can see all 3 of them have a contracted partner providing daycare in combination with the Ocean after-school support that we provide. Elmhurst has an extensive needs special education program on their campus. They also are one of the few elementary sites that have AVID. AVID is Advancement Via Individual Determination. It's a long-standing intervention program specifically designed for first generation, not exclusively designed, but specifically designed for first generation college-going students, to support them in secondary, to be A to G, to help them move through the college application process and move on to post-secondary school. But AVID also has kind of an elementary component that Elmhurst has adopted. Juana Maria has a mild moderate. So in the special education spectrum of needs, we have mild moderate and then moving to more extensive needs. It used to be called moderate severe. We call it extensive needs programs. Those are sort of the broad categories of the special needs programs that we have. Extensive needs programs are SDC programs. They are the majority of the day. So when we say we could have special education students, we have special education classes, but we don't necessarily have SDC classes, special day classes. That means that those students are getting services, but they're not in special education settings or classes for the majority of the day. So extensive needs special students are in special education settings for the majority of their day. And that's one of the things that separates, not all the time, extensive needs and mild moderate special education. You can have SDC mild moderate programs, and if there are questions about that, Neil's probably best equipped to answer those. But we've noted those throughout, and Stacy, I think to your point, that's where that's one way that we're doing it here. Sarah, lots of schools have PBIS programs. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. It's essentially kind of a structured way you make the invisible expectations of how to behave and interact visible with signs and rewards, and a lot of our schools have that, but PBIS is a kind of a specific state level program that Sarah is really far along in in achieving those really high metrics of success with, so we noted it there. An emotional therapeutic special education program, so that would be considered a sort of a mild moderate special education program, but it is an SDC program. So that's where students with emotional therapeutic needs are in a special education setting for the majority of their day. Any questions on those three? Okay, moving on. We're on Lemon Grove. Okay, Lemon Grove is one of our three.
I'm sorry, just in the interest of time, we do have left the criteria to score.
Okay.
And so I wonder if maybe instead of highlighting every single special program, if we could just give the committee members 2 or 3 minutes to quietly page through and move on to middle school.
Absolutely, happy to do that.
Okay. So could you please do that for the next 2 or 3 pages of elementary, and then we'll have Greg continue with middle school.
I have a quick question. Are any of the programs that are listed for these elementary schools not able to be relocated?
No.
Okay.
And the TWI at Sheridan Way, is that still Chinese?
No, it's Spanish. It used to be, they used to teach Mandarin as a part of their magnet program, but that ended at least 6 years ago.
Okay. And then I guess I will also have a question about, are any of these special programs funded by things outside of the school district that maybe a PTA that wouldn't want to, Sheridan Way wouldn't want to send their money to another school?
Oh, that's a really good question. Of those that so there are those programs and initiatives out there. I don't think I listed any here because they weren't sort of broad, big, defining district programs.
Are there any other questions from the committee on the elementary school programs? Okay, let's move on to middle.
I'll try to be swift. Going over to middle school. As you can see, I noted we have 4 comprehensive middle schools: Anacapa, Balboa, and wherever I put it, Anacapa, Balboa, and Cabrillo and Data. Okay, so there they are, right up there. I'll go off there rather than this. So I noted in white all of our Middle schools have the accelerated math pathway. 2 of them are 1 year behind, but they all have the pathway. They all have Renaissance Awards program. They all have co-teaching. Co-teaching is special education and general education courses combined, where students can get their special education minutes, but in a general education setting. They all have AVID and ASB leadership, and they each have a wellness center. So at Anacapa, as I mentioned before, that's the home of our singular middle school home of our TWI program. They also have the Ron Clark Academy. That's their house system. They're the only site to have that. They have beginner and intermediate music programs. They have a woodshop program, and they have ELOP after school, Ocean after school, which not all of our middle schools have. At Balboa, again, similarly, they have a beginner and intermediate music program. They, through Prop 28, they have after-school drama, theater, and club. So Prop 28 money is specific site-based money that the state gives based on your population size and your unduplicated count to go towards enhancing and supplementing arts education on the campus. They have the extensive support needs special education program. They have a woodshop, and they're also a Leader in Me. If we go over to...
They also have an ELOP program after school.
Oh, they do. Balboa. Correct. I'm so sorry. We're on Cabrillo and data. So same thing, no differences there. Accelerated math, co-teaching, AVID, ASB, wellness. Cabrillo houses our deaf and hard of hearing special education program, and I should have mentioned that deaf and hard of hearing special education program in elementary, actually we didn't mention it because you were looking at the sheets, that's at Loma Vista, and those students transition to Cabrillo. They have beginner, intermediate, and advanced music. They have a woodshop class, and they have Spanish 1 and 2, which is a little bit distinct from other middle schools that offer Spanish 1. Data has those same 4. They have sort of a quasi-TWI program. It's a maintenance program primarily for native speakers only, so not for students that were in our TWI program. It's sort of a maintenance trying to maintain their native Spanish in secondary. They have the IDEA program. I think many of us are familiar with that, and the IDEA Center partnership. They have a music program at Data. They have, it houses our middle school wrestling program. So all middle school wrestling comes out of there with all the equipment, the mats, et cetera. Again, can be moved. In terms of structure, they're the only middle school structure that has block periods. Again, that's irrelevant for moving things, except for the fact that it's voted on by staff. So as staff changes, that a vote could change and make it block or not block. So I think that is relevant now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, those are our 4 comprehensive middle schools, and so now we're ending with our...
And again, all of the middle school programs are movable?
All of the middle school programs are movable among the 3 sites, correct.
Is there a way to get like a cost associated to each one of these programs and participation rate?
I mean, we could next meeting is fiscal anyway, so we're going to be looking at
so maybe that's part of that.
Revenues and expenditures as a whole.
Because I get that they're movable, but how much do they cost, and are kids participating? Like, I'm just curious. So you have all these programs, but is it worth to move them if people aren't participating? I'm just curious.
So again, not to be the most frustrating person in the room, which I probably am at this point, but relevant to what the exchange and the conversation that Stephanie and I had with the group, that can be very distorting too. So for example, if I'm a principal and I, at my site, based on the data that I've collected in the community, I am going to add, through Prop 28 monies, I'm going to add a music class. That music class is so small, it would have no ability to survive in a regular master schedule because I don't have enough classes or allocations to spend a class period on that. But with Prop 28, I can have 4 kids in that class. I can have 8. So it'll look like, well, that's sort of under enrolled, and you're right. But it's in a category called special protected money that that community has said we want that, and so it's.
So it's possible that if you move that program, that community may not want it.
That's correct.
Okay.
So Prop 20, I think it is important that we talk about Proposition 28. Proposition 28 monies are allocated to the sites, not to the district. They're allocated to the sites, and by law, the principal has the discretion on how to supplement their arts programs. And we have a process. It's not just a principal in the back room coming up with their favorite arts program, but we have surveys. They should be talking to their school site councils, their PTA, their leadership, and coming up with what do kids want to take. And then they have an allocation. That allocation rolls over for 3 years. It has a 3-year lifespan, and we get a new allocation each year. So principals spend that money, and we submit plans to the board for feedback and input, and it's spent each year. So yes, that changes. It'll change the amount they get because the amount of the Proposition 28 amount changes based on the enrollment and on the unduplicated count of that site. And so something that was deemed desirable at one site, when it comes into this other site, the community process of engagement changes, and so there could be a different outcome.
And also, if there's like for middle schools, you have wood shop at many different sites. So if the decision is reached that one of the middle schools is closed, you essentially don't have to move a wood shop program from one site to another site. You already have wood shop at many different sites. So it depends. That's a loaded question.
And I'll just add one more thing, and if I'm taking too long, feel free to cut me off. The other reason why some of those enrollment numbers can be distorting is that our desire, our ask of all principals is to work, as we decline and get small, is to maintain breadth of course of study. And so as you get smaller, the pressure gets on elective programs, the pressure's on those singleton AP courses, and so you have to find ways to run that one section of 20 students in AP Physics because it's critical for those students' matriculation to the next phase. So now I've got to find ways, I got to run a few classes big in order to make room to run that class small. And so when you're just looking at it in absolute terms, it might look like, whoa, that's low enrolled, but we are working very hard at maintaining breadth of course of study as we get small in secondary.
And then if it's a special education, like say there's a specific special education program at a certain site that's selected to close, and if it's in that student's specific IEP that he needs this service or this specific equipment, we would have to move it. We would have no choice in that.
Okay, I don't see any green, so moving on. El Camino, once again, is not one of our comprehensive sites. It's it is our only independent study program, middle college, on the Ventura College campus. And I'll let you speak to any questions about who owns that with the buildings and lease, et cetera. But in terms of program, it's independent study. Those students come at least once a week to touch base with their teacher who's guiding them through guiding them through independent study courses that we provide, but then also helping shepherd them through dual enrollment courses that they're taking either in hybrid form or in-person brick and mortar on Ventura College campus or independent study dual enrollment on Ventura College campus. So it's connected to the CAPS Media Center right there across the way from Foothill. And it's one of only 2 sites that has on-campus dual enrollment. So dual enrollment is when a student is in high school and they take a community college course. We have many, many students taking dual enrollment, but they're doing it through independent study outside of their school day. We have 2 sites, Pacific High School and El Camino, where we have those courses offered on campus during the school day. And that's the most desirable kind of dual enrollment, and we're consistently working with our community college partners to expand on-campus dual enrollment. And I think we're headed towards potentially some exciting things in the future, yeah.
And El Camino was presented in our last meeting. It was we own the portables, but we leased that land from Ventura Community College District. It was $24,252 a year.
Okay, going on to Foothill Technology. Again, as all of our comprehensive middle schools, high schools have Avid ASB Wellness Center. They house 3 unique CTE programs, pathways, design tech, DTech, bioscience, and commercial art. All of our comprehensive high schools have CTE pathways. But these are specific to Foothill. They also have a theater and dance program. We have the music students that multi-site back to their boundary schools. They don't offer music on campus. They have a CCAP community college pathway. The students walk across the street to Ventura College, so it's technically not on their campus, but it is during the school day. So it's sort of a quasi on-campus dual enrollment program. They have one of our most robust corporate sponsors for the Blue Tech Academy with a partnership through Blue Robotics, and that was at Ventura Harbor last year, where students learn about the blue economy and all the different engineering opportunities with the ocean economy. And they don't have they have an all athletics booster program. Most high schools have sports specific booster programs. I did want to mention one thing about sports because I think there was a public comment about it earlier. And again, just to offer this as something for you to be thinking about because I think it's important. I do know, of course, there's a cost associated with athletics at Foothill, given they don't have their own facilities. Many of their sports programs are housed and practice and competitions are at our own facilities. Some of them are not. They're at Ventura College or the Kimball Community Park pool. And I think the comment was about, well, those students can play sports. Well, that's at other schools. There's an asterisk there that's important, and I think it's important because it relates to finances. Most of our sports are cut sports. In other words, there's not room for every student. So that means that it's kind of a zero. It's not a perfectly expansive game. It's a bit of a zero-sum game whereby those students wouldn't make teams. They would displace other students on the teams. And so you would have a high number of students that would need PE credits in order to graduate. PE credits require teachers. And so it's not a perfect financial calculation. It requires some investigation. So I just wanted to offer that based on the
those
the
costs
comment.
were provided at the previous meeting as well. Just a reminder, Foothill Tech was about approximately yearly for expenses for athletics, about $288,939.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to Pacific High School.
Greg, Dr. Bayless, can you just mention what the what FIRE is, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I skip over that?
Yeah.
Of our three comprehensive high schools, Foothill is the only school that has a seminar advisory period whereby students get support for, they can go to teachers, make up tests during the school day, get help, etc. Whereas in other sites, you have, hopefully they come in at lunch or after school, and that can be challenging, particularly for student athletes. So that's generally something that is deemed desirable in secondary schedules, is a specific period of time during the school day where students can move around and get help. And it's also an incentive program for students who have above a certain GPA. They can go off campus and have a longer lunch. So thank you for that. Yes, they have a Renaissance program as well. Renaissance is, you're a better elevator speech on that than me, having run it for 20 years.
Renaissance is a flexible framework that schools use to create positive climate and culture. So they're focusing on academic achievement, growth, and then character development. So what it looks like from site to site could be completely different. But what it does is takes into consideration positive reinforcement of all the things that you want to reward. You want to catch them doing something right. Renaissance helps you to build that structure in. So we just went from 2 of our schools were schools of distinction for Renaissance last year. We just upped that to 5 this year, and our goal is to get all of the secondary schools recognition next year.
Yeah, really cool program, and props to you, Melanie, for helping it launch so successfully here. Okay. I'm on Pacific. I think we've talked quite a bit about Pacific. Happy to talk about it a little more. I apologize. I think I did say Foothill's the only school, comprehensive school with an advisory period. Pacific is not a comprehensive school, but it does also have an advisory period. It's one of the 2 schools with on-campus dual enrollment. It also has Renaissance. They do a sort of a really cool Elder Buddies program that I just thought it was important to put in there because it's a nice relationship that shows up on graduation when the Elder Buddies are seated on the track. And they have an after-school assets program. So assets is, I won't explain the acronym, but it's a secondary version of ELOP that only applies to two of our schools, Pacific High School and Ventura High School. So Pacific houses one of the two locations where it occurs. And that's it. Okay.
Good job, Greg.
Thank you, son. That's twice you said something nice to me. I appreciate it. Let the record show.
Okay, thank you for such a comprehensive look at all the special programs and the test data. Coming around is the criteria packet. I guess could you also confirm that all of the high school programs are transferable to another campus? Right. Yes. Except something like what did you say is specific? No, right. That wasn't the one I was thinking of, but you're right, that would be difficult to move.
We didn't include
advisory class.
That
would have to be something that if Foothill moved and those students moved, that program maybe would be adopted.
So that's a bell schedule issue, and per the district VUEA contract, that's voted on by teachers. So that is something that is not definitively transferable.
Similarly to the block schedule that you mentioned.
That's correct, and at data. Kristen, you had a question?
I didn't see you.
So wait, I missed this. You're saying you went over the high schools all being transferable? Did you say that any high school could be moved?
No, the programs. So what he had said, what I thought you said is that the programs were.
Yes. Is the question, can all high school programs be moved? Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking logistics.
So
I'll stop.
I mean, that doesn't mean they can all be moved easily, or some programs that are connected, can they be moved anywhere? No, because some of them would follow teachers, and we have VUEA protocols for transfer protocols. So this committee could not say that we want this program here. If that teacher, according to human resources and contract transfer rules, goes here, that teacher is uniquely credentialed to teach that program. So in terms of facilities, in terms of program, in absolute terms, the answer is yes. However, the asterisk has to do with personnel.
All right, so let's go through the criteria. So we're going to go through criteria 14 through 18, and so for this criteria, it's a little different. So when you look at the score on the right-hand column, you're looking at a number 2 means yes, and a number 1 means no. So if a school does not meet performance in the lowest 2 performance levels in 2 or more state priorities. So if you look at just an example, Atlas has 2 oranges, right? So that means it's not meeting or exceeding state priorities in ELA or math, so that score for that school is 2. And if you look at, in comparison, J. Sarah has no oranges and no reds, so that receives a score of a 1. And so that's how that column works. And if you look at the next column, I wouldn't say it's a rank score, it's more of a cumulative score for this specific criteria. All it's doing is taking a look at each school and the oranges and reds in each school, in each state priority, and adding them up. So for instance, Atlas has 2 oranges, so that score is 2. Citrus Glen has 3 oranges, and so forth. So if you look at like Juana Maria, it has 3 oranges and 1 red, so that receives a 4, and so forth.
So in essence, the NAs are a bonus score?
Sorry, is that for Buena? Yeah, sorry. So
Just
Buena,
the NA column. So are we just are assuming that those would be?
we're not counting the NAs.
I know,
scores, yeah.
but they're being counted against other schools.
Yeah, because those specific criteria only apply to certain schools, and the NAs in some of those categories, unfortunately, they didn't have enough participation.
Well, that's just not good science, though. How are we? Why are we doing that exactly?
Right. So what I think you're saying is that when we look at Ventura, no, we're looking at Ventura as a NA. Ventura and Buena are the NAs. Are those not the 2-year? Oh, okay. Oh, got you. So that could be a yellow for all we know, and yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, I think that is valid. Yeah.
Just to go back to the previous discussion, even though, and this goes back to the counterintuitive piece, right? Even though we would want to say there are apples to apples comparisons, in this case, it is apples to apples because the state has said that the results are not reportable, so they're just not reportable. And we have to take that because the color hasn't been assigned. And so therefore that's an A. There's no other way around it. It's a state decision.
But once again, the committee has the discretion to say, hey, as you guys are going through your deliberations, to say, hey, we're not using this, right?
Well, it's literally half.
Right. Or you weight it differently. That's absolutely up to the committee.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to criterion 15. Oh, sorry.
Dr. Aslan, so I'm just curious. I understand that the answer is a yes to the question that it does not. So it basically confirms that it does not meet the criteria, right? So I'm curious if on the rank score you have Juana Maria School with a number 4, it only has 1 red, but when you compare it to Sheridan Way, for example, and not to pick to Sheridan Way, they actually have a ranking of 3. So what's the difference, and how do we?
It has a red. It has a score of 4, Juana Maria, because you're adding the oranges and the reds up, right? So that's why. Orange, red meaning bad. And so essentially what this cumulative score, I wouldn't call it a rank score because it's not officially ranking the schools from 1 through 17. It's just adding up all of the state priorities within those categories that are in the oranges and the reds. Two or yes. Yeah.
So can we look at Lemon Grove? I don't know if that's correct then.
You're right. Lemon Grove should have a 3 at the cumulative score.
Balboa looks like it might need to be looked at as well.
1, 2, 3. Yep, Balboa should be a 3 on the rank score or cumulative score. 14.
Carol, were you still wondering something? No? Okay, fine. Okay, are we ready to go on to 15?
Yeah. So the next two criterion 15 and 16. Criterion 15 specifically is speaking with ELA, and then criteria 16 looks at math, but it's the same concept here. So if we look at, who has the clicker? Can we move that to criteria? Oh, sorry, Greg. So criterion 15, we're looking at, yep, there you go. So yeah, if you can zoom in just a little bit. All right, so this is looking at ELA on the smarter balance assessments, and the score column on the right-hand side is looking at the column that says nearly or not met. So if you look at towards the right-hand side, right before the variance from the district, there's a column that says nearly or not met. So it's looking at that column, and then if you scroll to the bottom, if you look at the bottom, there's a district-wide in that specific area. So for ELA, for this specific criteria, if it's below that of the district average, which is at 50.82%, when we look at this is looking at like a double negative. So the higher the school is away from the district percentage. So if the district percentage for nearly or not met for ELA is at 50%, if a school is at 60%, that means they're worse off than the district as an average, right? As a whole. So let's look at some examples here for a 2 and what would be a 1. And so if you look at J. Sarah, you're at 48.83%. That's below the district-wide at 50.82, so they're getting a 1 score as compared to, say, Atlas, which they're at 51.61. That is above, meaning worse off than where the district stands in ELA for nearly or not met. And then, so that's how that looks at it for that specific column for the 1s and 2s. And then it's ranking it, the next column, which is a rank score, it's actually ranking each school from like the percentage furthest away from the district percentage. So if you look at, say, let's look at the extreme. So if you look at number 17, which I believe that's Sheridan Way, it's at 87.12 in nearly or not met, and that's the furthest one of the elementary schools away from 50.82%, which is the district. And then the opposite of that would be a number 1, which would be 33.19%, which is Mound. And so that's why they're receiving the 1. And so it's the same concept for this criteria for ELA as it is for the next criteria math. I don't know if I'm confusing people. I was confused when I looked at it. So.
I mean, I think I think the explanation, if you think about it and look at the numbers, it makes sense. While I've already interrupted, our planned meeting time is 8:30. It extends to 8:30. In order to continue with scoring the last of the criteria, we need consensus that we can add 15 minutes to tonight's meeting time to finish. And can I just do that as sort of just a general consensus? Are we okay with that? Can you do a thumbs up or something that just, okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we will continue till 8:45.
Okay. So same thing for 15 and 16, same concepts that we went over. So you guys could take a look at each of those scores and the rank score, see if it makes sense. So moving to 17 and 18 are, they go by pretty quickly. It refers to what Dr. Bayless was talking about.
Sorry, do we want more time for 16?
Sorry.
15 and 16 are the same basic.
Just looking at two different,
Yeah, but just different subject matter. So either math or ELA, but the same general guidelines met or not met. So I think, can we take just a couple minutes to digest those charts?
Yep.
Looking at 15 and 16 specifically.
So once again, you're looking at the nearly or not met column, and you're looking at the score is either 1 or 2, meaning if it's, it gets, so for math, let's go to criterion 16, the district-wide is 63.31%. So if a school is above the 63.35% that the district has, then that means it's worse off in math. And so it'll get a 2. And if it's below the 63.35, it would get a 1. And then the rank score is just the school site that's furthest away from the district. So if you look at, once again, for math, it looks like number 17 was Sheridan Way at 82.93, giving it a variance of 19.62. And number 1 would be J. Sarah, scoring at 57.67 with a variance of only 5.64. And this is a lot of info to digest, a lot of numbers to look at. So, like always, if there's questions that arise afterwards, please email us and we'll post and answer the questions as they come.
Question. I'm not sure, but when I checked the website, the committee website with the files and everything, was this available?
So the rankings get posted after
Okay.
We present them. So we do that intentionally. So this committee, I guess, pays attention to the presentation and doesn't just jump to the scoring.
Yeah. And that's that's for me personally. Yeah.
But it will
go
be.
home,
It will be
digest.
after tonight. It'll
Yeah.
be posted on the website.
On Monday, it will be posted on the.
Okay. All right. Monday.
They think I live here. I'm happy to call all of you this weekend. Hi, this is Maria Ann Quiros on behalf of the district. I've just posted. I will post that along with the recording on Monday. I just ask for 2 business days usually, but typically I get it done in 1, but we need to edit the video as well. So we make sure everything's there about 2 business days after we've done it. Sorry.
I actually thank you, Kevin, for asking that question, because I do think it's really important that all of the information and data that we're looking at as a committee is widely available and easily accessible to anyone who wants to look at it with us. So thank you for the question.
I should also state that we also put a social media post up with a summary of what you've discussed, along with all the links, and typically in the newsletter, but we don't have one going out in July or June. We're only in June.
So since we're off subject, we're going to stay off subject for just a moment. Victoria reminds me that there was a question about publishing or making accessible the Q&A piece, and that also is available on the same school closure committee website or page on the school district's, and also on social media, Marianne? No.
That would just be on the
just on the website
webpage, yeah.
Okay, so, and that is a live document, so it's continually updated. So do we feel comfortable with going on to 17? Okay.
So 17 and 18, they're all under like one scoring rubric. Essentially, it's listing out all of the district-wide special programs at each site that Dr. Bayless went over, and it's assigning it a 1 For criteria 17, 1 or a 2, 1 is a yes and 2 is a no. If this specific program would need to be relocated, and then criterion 18 looks at exactly that, all of those programs, and if these programs can be relocated, and it's assigning it a 2 as a yes and a 1 as a no. And so as you see, like Dr. Bayless mentioned, all of the schools have programs, and those programs can be relocated. Right?
Yes, except for the small asterisk that I added around teachers and credentials, and I think that that's important, but that's not anything that can be controlled by this committee, so I just want to be honest about that.
Just on that note, though, and I mean, I guess we can talk about this when it's time to have our discussion, but, you know, then maybe these special programs shouldn't be considered at all, those particular ones.
A question. The ranch, Salt Elias Ranch, correct? How would that be relocated?
Well, that's technically not a Pacific High School specific program. It's a district-wide program. So it receives busloads of students from throughout our district for experiences. It does provide a CTE pathway for Pacific High School students, but we have students from other high schools taking part in that pathway as well. So it's a bit like maybe robotics at Ventura High School, where it's housed there, but we get multi-sites from all over the district that take that class. So it's not a Ventura High School specific program. And I think that's even more the case with Salt Elias Ranch.
I mean, so essentially, can it still be utilized at the site even if that school was to be closed down, right?
Correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Catherine, are you?
Right. It couldn't. It physically would not be relocated, but it would still be accessible to all students. Yeah.
Okay. Looks like eyes are up, so I'm going to assume that we've had sufficient time to look at those last couple criteria. Pretty straightforward, those last two. So let's see, I'm going to go back to the agenda, and it looks like the only thing left to do is to remind folks that we have 3 remaining meetings scheduled: fiscal and other impacts, July 17th. Analysis and prioritization, that's us chatting. July 16th. Let me put my glasses on. Yeah, did I say 16? Oh, okay. Thank you for the correction. I can see it now. Analysis and prioritization, August 20th, and review and board report on 9/17. Okay. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and commitment.